Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Snow White in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Snow White. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, starcast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you, friends, to watch this video till the end. So start the video. Disney's Snow White, or simply Snow White, is a 2025 American musical fantasy film. It is a live-action reimagining of Walt Disney's 1937 animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, itself based on the 1812 fairy tale Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. Produced by Walt Disney Pictures and Marc Platt Productions, the film was directed by Marc Webb and written by Erin Cressida Wilson. It stars Rachel Zegler as the title character, a princess who escapes assassination by her stepmother, the evil queen Gadot, and joins with seven dwarfs and a rogue bandit named Jonathan, Andrew Burnap, to reclaim her kingdom. Plans for a Snow White remake were confirmed in October 2016, with Wilson attached as a screenwriter. Webb entered talks to direct in May 2019 and was announced as director in September. Principal photography took place in the United Kingdom from March to July 2022, with additional reshoots taking place in June 2024. The film was initially set to be released in March 2024, but faced delays due to the SAG-AFTRA strike. Prior to its release, the film generated significant controversy regarding its colorblind casting, changes to the story, and the reimagining of the Seven Dwarfs. Additional controversy stemmed from lead actress Zegler's public critiques of the original film and Donald Trump, as well as her and Gadot's opposing views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, leading to calls for boycotts on both political sides. Snow White premiered at the Alcazar of Segovia in Segovia, Spain, on March 12, 2025, and was theatrically released in the United States on March 21st. It received mixed reviews. Critics praised Zegler's performance, but took issue with some of the film's stylistic choices. With a production budget of $240 to $270 million, it is one of Disney's most expensive films. It has grossed $205 million worldwide and is considered by analysts to be a box office bomb. Plot: a benevolent queen gives birth during a snowstorm. To honor the day, she and her husband name their daughter Snow White. Years later, after the queen dies of a sudden illness, the king hastily remarries before embarking on a military campaign. When he disappears, the new queen usurps the throne, revealing herself as an enchantress whose vanity surpasses her beauty. Under the evil queen's rule, subjects are either left destitute or conscripted into the royal guard. Fearing that Snow White's beauty will outshine her own, the queen confines Snow White to the palace, forces her to work as a scullery maid, and asks a magic mirror daily who is the fairest one of all. The mirror always responds in her favor. One day, Snow White sees Jonathan, the leader of a band of bandits, raiding the pantry. When he is sentenced to be tied to the gates, she frees him. That same day, the magic mirror deems Snow White as the fairest. The queen orders the royal huntsman to take Snow White into the forest, kill her, and bring her heart back in a jeweled box. The huntsman instead warns Snow White of the queen's intentions. At his urging, Snow White flees deep into the forest. Woodland animals lead Snow White to a secluded cottage where she falls asleep. She awakens later that night to find herself confronted by the owners, the seven dwarfs who work in a diamond mine. They sympathize with her and agree to let her stay. Meanwhile, the queen, having learned from the magic mirror that Snow White is still alive, imprisons the huntsman before ordering a search. Snow White and Jonathan meet again in the forest and fend off the guards alongside the bandits. The two realize their feelings for each other before Jonathan departs to find the king, whom Snow White believes may still be alive. Jonathan is captured by the guards and imprisoned by the Queen, who deduces Snow White's whereabouts. Retreating to her secret chambers, she creates a magic poisoned apple that will put whoever eats it into a death-like sleep. Transforming into a peddler woman, the Queen goes to the cottage after the miners leave for work. Claiming to be an ally of Jonathan's, the Queen tricks Snow White into eating the apple. She then reveals to her stepdaughter that she killed her father. Snow White falls into a death-like sleep, and the Queen retreats to her castle. The miners find her sleeping body upon returning. Having escaped, Jonathan arrives to discover her dead and mournfully kisses her. Snow White awakens and rallies the miners and Jonathan's bandits to overthrow the evil Queen. Snow White confronts her stepmother, who forcefully goads her to take the throne, placing a diamond dagger into her hand. Snow White refuses to hurt her, reminding the people what the kingdom used to be like under her parents' rule. Moved, the guards turn on the Queen and join the miners, the bandits, the huntsmen, and the civilians. The Queen tries to attack Snow White, but the miners and bandits defend her. The magic mirror tells the Queen that Snow White will always be fairer than her due to her kindness and justness. Snow White arrives to see the Queen angrily destroying the mirror, the source of her powers. As a result, she turns into glass herself and disappears into a vortex while the magic mirror repairs itself. With Snow White named the new Queen at a grand party, everyone in the kingdom arrives to celebrate. Cast Rachel Zegler as Snow White, a fearless and pure-hearted princess who is determined to free her kingdom from her stepmother's tyranny. Emilia Fauché as young Snow White, Olivia Verral as baby Snow White, Gal Gadot as the evil Queen, Snow White's vain, jealous, and tyrannical stepmother who is obsessed with being the fairest one of all. Andrew Burnap as Jonathan, a new character created as Snow White's love interest, partially based on the prince from the original film, and a rebel who wants to defy the evil Queen's monarchy. Jeremy Swift as the voice facial motion capture of Doc, the intelligent leader of the Seven Dwarfs. Jonathan Bourne as the motion capture puppeteer of Doc. Martin Kleba as the voice facial motion capture of Grumpy, a grouchy member of the Seven Dwarfs. Omari Bernard as motion capture puppeteer of Grumpy. George Salazar as the voice facial motion capture of Happy, a cheerful member of the Seven Dwarfs. David Birch as the motion capture puppeteer of Happy. Titus Burgess as the voice facial motion capture of Bashful, a shy member of the Seven Dwarfs. Leah Hale as the motion capture puppeteer of Bashful. Andrew Grotlueschen as the voice facial motion capture of Sleepy, a tired member of the Seven Dwarfs. Sandy Foster as the motion capture puppeteer of Sleepy. Jason Kravitz as the voice facial motion capture of Sneezy, a member of the Seven Dwarfs who sneezes frequently. Dominic Owen as the motion capture puppeteer of Sneezy. Andrew Barth Feldman as the voice facial motion capture of Dopey, a member of the Seven Dwarfs who does not speak and makes other sounds until after Jonathan wakes Snow White from her sleeping death. He is ultimately revealed as the narrator. Jai Batot as the motion capture puppeteer of Dopey. Patrick Page as the voice facial motion capture of the Magic Mirror, a mirror containing a being that truthfully answers the evil Queen's question of who is the fairest one of all. Ansu Kabia as the Huntsman, an unnamed hunter and the evil Queen's servant whom she orders to kill Snow White and bring back her heart. Additionally, Hadley Fraser and Lorena Andrea appear as the Good King and the Good Queen, Snow White's parents. Appearing as Jonathan's team of 7 bandits are George Appleby as Quig, who is a master of the crossbow, Colin Michael Carmichael as Farno, Samuel Baxter as Scythe, Jimmy Johnston as Finch, Dujana Gift as Maple, who is Quig's love interest, Idris Cargbo as Bingley, and Jai Batot as Norwich. The Royal Guards consist of Adrian Bauer as the captain of the guards, Felipe Bejarano as Guard Paul, who used to work as a farmer that also grew cherry trees, Simeon Oakes as Guard Matthew, who used to work as a baker, Josh Main Joseph as Guard William, and Cheeky Chan as Guard Arthur. Production. Development. On October 31, 2016, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Walt Disney Pictures was developing a live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, with Marc Platt, an avid fan of the original film, signed on as lead producer, and Erin Cressida Wilson being in talks to write the screenplay. Callum McDougall, in his third producing collaboration with Disney and Platt, serves as an executive producer. Disney had been considering a live-action Snow White film since the early 2000s, and at one point planned on adapting the story as a martial arts film set in China. On May 30th, 2019, it was reported that Webb was in talks to direct. In November 2021, Greta Gerwig was reported to be co-writing the screenplay. Gurinder Chadha was also strongly considered for the directing job. Wilson ultimately received sole credit for the screenplay. Gerwig, Jez Butterworth, Stephen Levinson, Jeff Nathanson, Victoria Strauss, and Chris Weitz each received an additional literary material credit from the Writers Guild of America, although they are not credited in the film itself. Casting in June 2021, Rachel Zegler was cast in the title role. The casting of an actress of Latina descent as Snow White, who is described in the original Grimm fairy tale as having skin as white as snow, was met with criticism from some quarters. Zegler responded to the criticism in January 2022, stating that Snow White is popular in Spanish-speaking countries and that casting a Latina actress in the role was significant due to its rarity. In August 2023, it was reported that Mexican actress Renata Vaca had been one of 2 finalists for the role. Vaca revealed that the casting call was open to all ethnic groups and that initial auditions required performing a song from a Disney princess film. Zegler's casting was solidified through a glowing recommendation to Webb from Steven Spielberg, who directed Zegler as Maria in his 2021 film adaptation of West Side Story. In November 2021, Gal Gadot was cast as the Evil Queen. A new casting search for an actress to star as a younger version of Snow White was launched, and Amelia Fauché was cast. On January 12, 2022, Andrew Burnap was cast as a new character named Jonathan in the lead male role, replacing the character of the prince. At the 2022 Denver Fan Expo, Martin Kleba revealed that he would be portraying Grumpy. Kleba previously played similar dwarf roles in prior productions based on the Snow White fairy tale. In the 2001 made-for-television film Snow White, the Fairest of Them All as Friday, and in the 2012 fantasy comedy Mirror, Mirror as Butcher. Colin Michael Carmichael appears. In February 2025, Andrew Barth Feldman, Titus Burgess, Jason Kravitz, George Salazar, Jeremy Swift, and Andrew Grodelwesen were all cast as the remaining members of the Seven Dwarfs, with Salazar and Grodelwesen both making their film debuts. David Krumholtz auditioned for Grumpy and Sleepy. Writing. In October 2024, Zegler explained that the film would feature an altered origin for Snow White's name, with the character being named as an homage to the weather on the night of her birth, after surviving a snowstorm with her parents. A narrative element she stated was inspired by a previous adaptation of the fairy tale. She also faced criticism for comments about modernizing the titular character, particularly regarding the prince's role. At D23 Expo 2022, she stated, "The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time. We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because we cast a guy in the movie, Andrew Burnap, great dude. But it's really not about her love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby." Some criticize these changes as overly feminist, while others accuse Zegler of misrepresenting feminism. David Hand, son of the original film's co-director, called the remake insulting. The controversy prompted the Daily Wire to announce a competing adaptation, though production stalled after star Brett Cooper's 2024 departure. Zegler later clarified that the film would still include a love story, expressing sadness that her comments were misunderstood. In January 2022, actor Peter Dinklage, who has a form of dwarfism and has played dwarfish characters in his career, criticized the remake as a backward story. Disney responded that they were taking a different approach after consulting with the dwarfism community. This drew mixed reactions from other actors with dwarfism, including Hornswoggle, who felt Dinklage was costing them roles. Production footage from July 2023 revealed the dwarfs had been reimagined as one actor with dwarfism and 6 non-dwarf actors of diverse backgrounds. Disney initially denied, then confirmed these were production stand-ins, with confirmed dwarf actor Martin Kleba not appearing. The changes were criticized as overly politically correct and reducing opportunities for dwarf actors. Jason Weeman Acuna of Jackass criticized Disney, asking, "Why are you hiring Snow White and the 7 average people?" Postal defended the original animated portrayals, disagreeing with Dinklage. The final film features CGI versions resembling the 1937 characters, though they are never called dwarfs in dialogue or marketing. The film's title was shortened to Snow White to avoid emphasizing the dwarf characters. It also avoids Snow White being relegated to the dwarf's maid. Upon arriving at the cottage, she falls asleep, and the dwarfs agree to let her stay for her safety. During the musical number, Whistle While You Work, all the characters share in cleaning up the home. In addition, other traditional plot points are also reimagined. The huntsman spares Snow White's life and instead of placing an animal heart in a box as in the original, uses an apple, eliminating the need for animal death while preserving the deception. The film also reframes Snow White's identity. Her destiny is to be a fair and fearless leader, and the classic song "Someday My Prince Will Come" is replaced with "Waiting on a Wish." A solo about her hope to become her father's daughter and the kind leader she was raised to be. Prince Charming is also replaced by Jonathan, a bandit leader, whose relationship with Snow White evolves from mutual skepticism to earned respect and love. Filming. Filming for Snow White was originally set to begin in March 2020 in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Los Angeles, California, but it was delayed to July 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In August 2021, it was announced that filming would take place in the United Kingdom from March to July 2022. Principal photography began on March 7, 2022. A fire damaged the production set on March 15th at Pinewood Studios. The stage was under construction when a tree reportedly caught on fire, leading to a huge blaze. A source from Disney confirmed that no filming was underway. The shooting schedule was also reconfigured for Zegler to travel to Los Angeles to present at the 94th Academy Awards ceremony on March 27th in support of her West Side Story colleagues. While Zegler was attending the ceremony, Gadot began filming her scenes. Unlike in the original, her character sings and dances. On April 22nd, Gadot confirmed that she had completed filming her scenes, much later adding that she enjoyed playing the role of the first Disney villain and that she was able to make a more dramatic role by changing her voice due to the film being a musical. On July 13th, Zegler revealed that filming had wrapped. Mandy Moore, known for her work on La La Land, choreographed the musical sequences. Disney was unsatisfied with the film's original cut and ordered reshoots, which took place in June 2024. The resulting cut of the film replaced some of the originally intended ending with a new scene involving the evil queen and the magic mirror. The track Snow White Returns was also a late addition to the film. Much of the plotline involving the bandits was excised, as was a song titled "Hidden in My Heart," which was described by the New York Times as a second act tearjerker sung by one of the dwarfs. Visual effects for the film were provided by Moving Picture Company, Frame Store, Day for Night, Passion Pictures, Vitality Visual Effects, Cheap Shot VFX, Lola Visual Effects, and Crafty Apes. Music. Main article, Snow White. Songwriters Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, who previously wrote the lyrics for 2 new songs for Disney's 2019 remake of Aladdin, wrote new songs alongside Jack Feldman as additional lyricist, including a new I Want song for Snow White titled Waiting on a Wish. They also wrote a new villain song for the evil queen titled All Is Fair, a new love duet for Snow White and Jonathan titled A Hand Meets a Hand, written in collaboration with Lizzie McAlpine. and a new opening ensemble number titled Good Things Grow. The film features 4 of the 8 songs from the original film by Frank Churchill and Larry Morey: Hi-Ho, Whistle While You Work, The Silly Song, and Someday My Prince Will Come, the final of which is heard only instrumentally in the underscore due to the plot changes. In January 2025, it was revealed that Jeff Morrow had composed the score. Dave Metzger, a frequent collaborator on the music for films made by Walt Disney Animation Studios, served as orchestrator for the songs. Christoph Beck, who also worked on several Disney projects, both animated and live action, and for whom Morrow served as a protege, served as score consultant. On March 4, 2025, it was announced that the soundtrack album would be released on March 14th by Walt Disney Records, with Waiting on a Wish released to the public that same day as the lead single. A deluxe edition of the album was released on March 20th, 2025, featuring instrumental versions of the songs and Morrow's underscore. Marketing. On September 9th, 2022, during Disney's 2022 D23 Expo presentation, a 30-second first-look trailer as well as first-look images were previewed. There were quick flashes of several major settings, including Snow White's cottage in the woods, the intricately designed interior of the Queen's castle, and the moss-covered forest. There were also short glimpses of Gadot as the evil queen questioning her magic mirror, Zegler as Snow White, and Snow White's hand falling with the poisoned apple toppling along with her. Gadot said about her role that playing the evil queen was very different than what she had done before. She is used to playing the other end of where the heart should be, but she found it very delightful to get under her skin. The title logo was also revealed. On October 27, 2023, Disney released the official first image of the film with Zegler as Snow White, as well as Bashful, Doc, Dopey, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, and Sneezy. Zegler confirmed that there is a lot of CGI, which made her feel nervous. Footage of Gadot as the evil queen was shown at the 2024 CinemaCon. Disney presented new footage and a behind-the-scenes look during the 2024 Cine Europe Pie. The 2024 D23 Expo presented a sneak preview with a clip of the musical number Whistle While You Work, along with the first trailer. The trailer for Snow White was released on YouTube in August 2024 and became the most disliked film trailers on the platform, garnering an estimated nearly 1 million dislikes and over 82,000 likes within 3 weeks, according to available data from browser extensions that display an approximation of YouTube dislikes. The first full trailer debuted at D23 Brazil in November 2024 and was attached to select theatrical screenings of Universal Pictures' Wicked before eventually being released onto YouTube on December 3, 2024. Stuart Heritage of The Guardian criticized the visual effects for the animals and dwarves. He said the dwarves look like someone has snuck into Disneyland, grabbed the statues from Snow White's Enchanted Wish, and wrapped them in human flesh as a serial killer would with a gift for their mother, and like someone has shaved the Sonic the Hedgehog from that first Sonic the Hedgehog trailer that everyone hated. Polygon's Petrana Radulovic wrote, "The new Snow White looks like it's putting in more of a plot. Likely one where our plucky heroine will stand up to her despotic tyrant of a stepmother in a YA dystopian plotline out of 2014. Maybe it'll work story-wise. Visually, though, everything seems like it's working on the same budget as ABC Family's Once Upon a Time. An international trailer featuring Snow White's origins was released on December 19, 2024. A featurette showing a behind-the-scenes look and how it would honor the legacy of the 1937 film was released on February 20, 2025. The press tour began in Tokyo on March 5, 2025, with Zegler joining her Japanese dub counterpart Sakura Kiryu to perform Waiting on a Wish live for the first time. On March 10, 2025, the day tickets for the film went on sale. Disney released new posters, a TV spot, and a film clip. Zegler later appeared on the March 17, 2025 episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live to give the first live television performance of Waiting on a Wish. At least $70 million was spent on marketing, which combined with the main production budget gave Disney a total investment of $350 million for the film. Release: theatrical. During the 2022 D23 Expo presentation, it was announced that Snow White would be released in 2024. On September 15, 2022, the film was announced to have a release date of March 22, 2024. However, in October 2023, it was delayed a year to March 21, 2025, with the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike cited as the rationale for the delay. The theatrical release included engagements in IMAX, Dolby Cinema, 4DX, ScreenX, and D-Box. The European premiere took place on March 12, 2025 at Spain's Alcazar of Segovia, which inspired the castle in the original film to give the film a more elaborate showing at a fairy tale venue. A Hollywood premiere without regular red carpet press took place at the El Capitan Theater on March 15, 2025, due to the controversies surrounding Zegler and Gadot's political views. In Gadot's honor, the film's first premiere in Israel took place on March 19, 2025, at the Planet Cinema in Rishon LeZion, with prominent figures from Israel attending. The film was re-released in 1,000 theaters in the United States on May 9, 2025 during the Mother's Day weekend, making $335,000. Boycott. In August 2024, after the trailer for Snow White premiered, Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, BDS, and the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel, PAC-BI, called for a boycott of the film due to Gadot's past service in the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, and pro-Israel stance. The Washington Times, a conservative publication, viewed these calls as anti-Semitic. Boycott calls grew as Gadot and Zegler openly took opposing sides on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with Gadot supporting Israel and Zegler supporting Palestine. Before the film's release, Gadot received death threats attributed to her stance, which led Disney to provide additional security for her. Despite their opposing views, Gadot and Zegler had a positive relationship with each other during the film's production. Another call to boycott was made by Republican supporters in November 2024, following the U.S. presidential election, as Zegler posted, "Fuck Donald Trump," and attacked those who voted to re-elect him, saying, "May Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace." Zegler later issued a public apology, saying she did not intend any harm with her message. In March 2025, several Arab organizations and individuals opposed to Israeli policies launched a digital campaign against the film, particularly targeting Gadot due to her past military service. Groups from Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Tunisia, UAE, and Egypt called for a regional boycott, arguing that screening the film supports the Israeli occupation and the IDF's treatment of Palestinians. Later in April, the film was officially banned in Lebanon, and it was pulled from theaters in Kuwait. By April 2025, over 91% of reviews of Snow White on IMDb were 1-star, which led to the site flagging the film with a notice of unusual activity due to concerns of review bombing. Home media. Snow White was released for digital download on May 13, 2025, and will be released on Ultra HD Blu-ray, and DVD on June 24th. The home media releases include deleted scenes, a gag reel, and featurettes. A special 2-movie collection of the film and the animated movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, will also be released. Snow White was released on the streaming service Disney Plus on June 11, 2025. The film debuted at number 2 on Fandango at Home's top 10 digital sales and rental chart for the week ending May 18th, shortly after its May 13 release for premium digital rental and purchase. It subsequently ranked number 5 on the same chart for the week ending May 25th, and later placed number 8 for the week ending June 1st. Snow White ranked number 6 on the UK official film chart for the week ending May 28th. The film later ranked number 8 on the UK official film chart for the week ending June 4. Reception. Box office. As of June 11, 2025, Snow White has grossed $87.2 million in the United States and Canada and $118.4 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $205.6 million. The Hollywood Reporter stated the film may have trouble getting to $300 to $400 million globally, per several studio executives. In the United States and Canada, Snow White was released alongside The Alto Knights and Ash, and was projected to gross $45 to $55 million from 4,200 theaters in its opening weekend. It was initially projected to gross $63 to $70 million, with analysts comparing this projection to the $69.4 million opening of Maleficent 2014, and believing that the film would overcome its controversies and fare well financially, given there being no strong competition against it on opening weekend. But in late February, projections were lowered. The film made $16 million on its first day, including an estimated $3.5 million in Thursday previews. It went on to debut to $42.2 million, slightly below projections, but still managing to top the box office due to little competition. The low opening was attributed by The Hollywood Reporter to so-so audience scores and underwhelming reviews. Business Insider reported that the film's behind-the-scenes controversies likely had little impact on its box office performance, 143, while Deadline reported that the film's financial performance could primarily be attributed to its marketing, the source material failing to resonate with younger audiences, and negative buzz surrounding the film's visuals. In its second weekend, the film made $14.3 million, dropping 66%, finishing second behind newcomer A Working Man, and then $6.1 million in its third weekend, falling to fourth. Producer Marc Platt's son Jonah Platt attributed Snow White's underperformance in its opening week partly to Zegler's social media post supporting Palestine. Box office analysts largely disagreed with the view that the film's underperformance could be attributed to political controversies, and instead attributed it to the film's failure to resonate with critics and audiences. Some actors and musicians have defended Zegler's comments. Critical response. The film received mixed reviews. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 39% of 259 critics' reviews are positive. The consensus reads, Snow White is hardly a grumpy time at the movies thanks to Rachel Zegler's luminous star turn, but its bashful treatment of the source material along with some dopey stylistic choices won't make everyone happy either. Rotten Tomatoes also reported that critics thought Zegler was one huge highlight of the film, but Gadot's reception is mixed, as are the CGI dwarfs. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 50 out of 100 based on 51 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews, 153. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale, while those surveyed by PostTrack gave it an average rating of 3 out of 5 stars, with 43% saying they would definitely recommend it. The Hollywood Reporter noted that Disney's previous theatrical remakes earned cinema scores around the A range. The BBC reported that British film critics have mostly panned the film, while U.S. critics were more positive. Kathy Stephan of Variety lauded Zegler's performance, praising her as a shining supernova and her character as having newfound depth through her fervent desire to become the leader her father believed she could be. Siddhant Adlakha of IGN called the film the best Disney live-action remake in a decade and said that it adapts the broad strokes of the original while fleshing out its themes. Brian Truitt of USA Today wrote that it finds modern relevance amid the old material. Patrick Gomez of Entertainment Weekly described the film saying, Disney's best live-action remake is the fairest of them all. Nicholas Barber of the BBC wrote, the story is cluttered, the tone is muddled, and the pacing is off. Again, that doesn't make the film a disaster. In some ways, the identity crisis is what makes it worth seeing. Whitney Sable of Film wrote, it's hollow, but unlike some more recent remakes, it seems to have thoughts in its head. David Rooney of The Hollywood Reporter wrote of the premise, if that sounds like the standard female empowerment template that's almost obligatory in contemporary fairy tale retreads, it more or less is. But the incandescent Zegler sells it with conviction and heart. Daniel Bayer of Awards Watch wrote, Marc Webb gets the job done with minimal muss and fuss, and whenever Zegler is on screen, the film manages to conjure up some of that good old Disney magic. Dan Rubens of Slant called it a fairly paint-by-numbers exercise in updating a quintessential but unquestionably quaint property for modern consumption. Amy Nicholson of the Los Angeles Times wrote that the film is a fascinating case study in today's impossible contradictions, a magic mirror reflecting the tensions of the current times. Nell Minogue of RogerEbert.com gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4 and wrote, "Some parts of the film work better than others, but none of it has the sweetness and imagination of the animated feature. This Snow White is not the fairest of them all. It's just, well, fair." Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian called it exhaustingly awful, with tiresome pseudo-progressive additions, and criticized Zegler and Gadot's roles as the dullest performances of their lives. Johnny Oleksinski of the New York Post wrote, "The timeless classic, a groundbreaking achievement for animation, has been turned into another pointless and awkward live-action automaton that vanishes from your mind the second it's over." Tyler Tang of Discussing Film wrote, "Aside from Rachel Zegler's powerhouse performance, there's little else to enjoy from this clumsy, poorly conceived, and cynical live-action Disney remake. Even Gal Gadot's hilariously bad line reads are not worth the trip to the theater." Rodrigo Perez of The Playlist wrote, "While interjecting its social commentary, Snow White otherwise tackles much of the same ideas, the notions of true love, the power of friendship, and the triumph of good over evil. But it's all put together in a very familiar and garish package." David Fear of Rolling Stone said it may not be the worst live-action adaptation of an animated touchstone, though it's a strong contender for its blandest. Snow White Review. That title is a description of the page on which new Hollywood ideas get written. Here is a pointless new live-action musical version of the Snow White myth, a kind of unwicked approach to the story and a merch-enabling money machine. Where other movies are playfully reimagining the backstories of famous villains, this one plays it straight, but with carefully curated revisionist tweaks. These are all too obviously agonizing and backlash second-guessing, but knowing that at some basic level the brand identity has to be kept pristine. This is particularly evident in the costume design, with which the Wicked Witch gets a pointy dark crown and skull-hugging black balaclava, and Snow White is lumbered with a supermarket retail tweeny outfit with puffy-sleeved shoulders. Those otherwise estimable performers, Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, are now forced to go through the motions, and they give the dullest performances of their lives. Traditionally, the heroine's name refers to her skin, with lips red as blood and hair dark as ebony. Now it refers to the snowstorm that accompanied her birth. Zegler's Snow White had loving parents in the king and queen, but after her mother's death, her father becomes infatuated with a witchy new noblewoman at court. Gadot's lips are at all times seductively and contemptuously pursed. But later the king simply vanishes from the story, and the script ties itself into a few pretzels, explaining what is supposed to have happened to him and when. The stepmom witch keeps Snow White in Cinderella-style serfdom below stairs, where the poor child wanly sympathizes with the population's poverty. As Snow White grows up, the magic mirror breaks the bad news about a change in the prettiness ranking. Snow White is then forced to flee to the forest and stay there once the huntsman has lied to the witch about killing her. And then she meets her 7 new best friends. There are some changes. The hero is no longer a prince, but a more democratic citizen who leads a Robin Hood-type insurgency from the forest against the witch's tyranny, with SW joining in on a Maid Marian basis. But he still gets to do the controversial non-consent kiss once our heroine has gone into her picturesque coma. But the dwarves? Will this film make them look sort of like everyone else, like the Munchkins in Wicked? No. This Snow White feebly makes them mocapture animated figures, but it also heart-sinkingly duplicates their presence by giving the prince his own gang of 7 live-action bandits, in which people with dwarfism are represented. This fudged, pseudo-progressive approach is so tiring you'll want to put your head in your hands. Admittedly, the basic story has a strangeness of its own. The Wicked Queen tries to kill Snow White by getting the huntsman to stab her, and then tries again by feeding her a poisoned apple, which has an antidote in the form of a true love's kiss, and then leaving the corpse in the company of people who love her. weird. This new Snow White has one or two nice musical moments, but it's basically in the unhappy tradition of revisionist light reboots Mirror, Mirror and Snow White and the Huntsman, with Julia Roberts and Charlize Theron respectively as the witch, and the equally ropey prequel, The Huntsman Winter's War. Hollywood could, in theory, reinvent Snow White with some passion. Instead, the only decent revival has been Pablo Berger's surrealist Blancanieves from 2013. This feels like a very hard day's work in the IP diamond mine. To be fair, and fair is a word of double importance in Disney's live-action remake of its first animated feature, a 2025 version of Snow White is as thorny as those wildly gnarled trees that keep grabbing Snow White, Rachel Zegler, when she's trying to run away from the huntsman ordered to kill her. The Grimm brothers' story was written more than 200 years ago. The Disney movie came out almost 90 years ago, in 1937. Even those who do not consider themselves especially woke might be troubled by a heroine who waits to be rescued, singing, "Someday my prince will come," as she gazes into the wishing well, merrily keeps house for 7 dwarfs with a mute one named Dopey, and is awakened by a non-consensual kiss from a prince she has never seen. But there is still enormous affection for the original film, and audiences will want its essential elements recreated. One way this version tries to thread that needle is in that word, fair. Who is the fairest of them all is a core element of the original folktale and every version ever since, including the gorgeously designed Mirror, Mirror, directed by Tarsem Singh, starring Lily Collins and the cheeky Amanda Bynes, updating in a contemporary college setting Sydney White, both worth watching. In this version, the question has more nuance because the young Snow White, Amelia Fauché, is taught by her parents, the kind king and queen, that she must learn to be fearless, brave, true, and fair, so important that they are engraved on her silver necklace. There is so much emphasis on the noblesse oblige duty to support and bake apple pies for the villagers that we can expect some acidic commentary from certain news outlets. The other core elements of any version of this story are all present here, with varying degrees of success. Near the top is replicating Disney's version of the iconic magic mirror that answers the question about fairness. The mirror for Sydney White's nemesis is the online campus popularity poll. This one is close to the 1937 film's design, familiar to Disney fans through many appearances in various productions, from The Wonderful World of Disney series of the 1950s, when it was voiced by Hans Conried, through the popular Descendants Wicked World series of 2015-17. Here, Shakespearean actor Patrick Page brings just the right stentorian vocal thunder to his answers. The evil queen's transformation into the hag with the poisoned apple is done with all the magic we expect from Disney, as is the production design, carrying over some of gorgeously imagined details of the 9 old men behind the 1937 animated feature. Likely in response to criticisms of the condescending portrayal of the dwarfs in the original film, this version chose to bypass casting humans and go with CGI. Their design is not as expressive as the animated versions, and their contributions to the story are not as meaningful, with a slapstick sequence that goes on too long. Dopey looks much younger than his old bearded housemates. He looks like Mad Magazine's Alfred E. Newman, and it is not much better than the original's unfortunate depiction of a mute as being simple-minded. In this version, he has a gentle, childlike quality. He does not speak only because he is afraid. Of what? Who knows? The resolution will strike many as insensitively ableist. Does he really need to be fixed? It is a nice touch to have Snow White tell the dwarfs to clean up their mess instead of doing it for them. The dwarf mining business makes no sense. They dig up gems, but what do they do with them? If I'm asking myself that question, the movie is failing to immerse me fully in its world. Instead of a prince who appears only to awaken the princess, we have Jonathan, a captivating Andrew Burnap, an erstwhile actor who lives in a liminal space where actions and motives are not well defined. The screenplay by playwright Erin Cressida Wilson has a lot of fun throwing big words around. That liminal space is basically Robin Hood territory in the woods, where he and an encouragingly diverse band of rebels steal from the rich and are true to the king. It is Snow White who initially rescues him when he is caught stealing food from the castle, a good start to a developing relationship of mutual support. Zegler does her best to straddle the old and new versions of Snow White, wearing the iconic dress with the turned-up collar, yellow skirt, and blue bodice, showing some spirit and singing sweetly. As soon as she was cast, there was online chatter along the same lines of the objections to Halle Bailey as Ariel in The Little Mermaid. Zegler's parents are Polish and Colombian. The movie handles this deftly by explaining that she was not named for the paleness of her skin, but for the snowstorm the night she was born. Gal Gadot plays the evil enchantress queen. Her singing voice is thin, and so is her performance, especially when she is called upon to show fury because her stepdaughter challenges her authority. The movie does not give her a lot to work with beyond the impressive costumes and special effects. Her signature magic trick is turning a flower into dust, and her big number, All Is Fair, is the weakest in a second-tier set of songs from EGOT awardees Benj Pasek and Justin Paul. It is not up to their gorgeous La La Land songs or the wonderfully clever Which of the Pickwick Triplets Did It from Only Murders in the Building. And it is not a personality-revealing banger like the all-time best Disney villain song from The Little Mermaid, Poor Unfortunate Souls, by Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. We get some snippets of some of the original film's classic numbers, Whistle While You Work, and the yodeling Silly Song, and a full-on Hi-Ho, which are more memorable than the new additions, possibly excepting Princess Problems, a nice duet between Snow White and Jonathan that sets up their differences in outlook, her empathy against the superficial cynicism he will soon happily jettison. Some parts of the film work better than others, but none of it has the sweetness and imagination of the animated feature. This Snow White is not the fairest of them all. It's just, well, fair. With all the turmoil besetting the real world, you'd think there might be more important things to inflate into controversies than the pre-release kerfuffles that have plagued Snow White. As it turns out, this is one of the better live-action adaptations of a Disney animated feature. And I say that as someone who mostly doesn't like them. Yes, I've enjoyed a couple, Cinderella, The Lion King. At heart, though, I still don't truly get the idea of Disney strip mining its animated IP, and doing so not because there's anything inherently appealing about turning painterly fairy tale cartoons into stilted, less sublime real-life versions of themselves. What the remakes are selling is the theme park novelty of the transformation. Look, here's what an animated classic looks like when it's retrofitted with sets and actors. All that said, the chirpy, vivacious, just romantic enough to get by Snow White proves to be an exception to the rule. Directed by Marc Webb, The Amazing Spider-Man, 500 Days of Summer, from a script by Erin Cressida Wilson, The Girl on the Train. The film is lighter, more frolicsome, less lead-footed than such clomping live-action Disney remakes as Alice in Wonderland, Beauty and the Beast, Dumbo, or Mulan. Rachel Zegler as Snow White has a pertly appealing glow, and Gal Gadot as the evil queen glares divinely in her darkly purplish cloaked finery, stained glass crown, nails like daggers, matching black lips and eyes, like the world's most furious dominatrix. I wish Gadot's vocal performance were more operatic and less Mata Hari, but she still makes a stylishly intense villain. But let's talk about the controversies, which in a rare moment of ideological combustibility come from both sides of the cultural politics spectrum. Is the casting of Rachel Zegler, an actor of Latin heritage, as Snow White, a character originally named for her complexion, some sort of problem? Just to pose that question is to float a thought at once racist and absurd. So short answer, no. In the new movie, our heroine is named for the snowstorm that took place the night she was born. And what of the fact that Snow White, abandoned in the woods, where the huntsman is too kind-hearted to carry out the evil queen's order to murder her, comes upon a cottage where 7 cute, quarrelsome 249-year-old short men with Amish beards live in bachelor squalor and become her protectors? The main objection to this has been raised by Peter Dinklage, the actor and proud spokesman for little people who has assailed the 7 dwarfs, concept as cringingly stereotypical and retrograde. I can sort of see what he means, though carried to its logical conclusion that POV would render the Wizard of Oz a crime against humanity. In the new Snow White, the word dwarf is never mentioned, and the CGI versions of the tale's little people honestly struck me as no more offensive or reality-based than hobbits. But what of Zegler's dismissal of the 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which was Walt Disney's first animated feature, and in my opinion, still the most poetic and ravishing of them all? Speaking to Variety, Zegler said that in the original film, there's a big focus on her love story with the guy who literally stalks her. Weird. She made it sound like the new Snow White might toss away the romance right along with the gorgeous fairy tale matte work. What is Snow White, after all, if not a love story? Actually, the love story remains quite intact. The fabled prince is gone, replaced by a noble ruffian, Jonathan Andrew Burnap, who Snow White first encounters when he's trying to steal potatoes out of the castle scullery. Their flirtation is very contempo Disney. It reminded me of the romance in Frozen, where love tussles with the lure of empowerment. I will say that it's telling that in a film that exuberantly revives most of the key songs from the original Snow White, Hi-Ho, Whistle While You Work, the filmmakers have given the heave-ho to Someday My Prince Will Come. This makes literal sense, since the prince is no longer a character. But what a song to lose. There's a haunting magic to it, and that layer of magic isn't there in the new Snow White. Yet our heroine's emotional journey remains vibrant, as does the story's enchantingly wide-eyed and sinister design, the evil queen's relationship with her magic mirror, the face of her malignant narcissism, and the way Snow White, after her mother, the good queen, Lorena Andrea, dies and her father, the good king, Hadley Fraser, is sent away to war. He never returns, becomes a servant like Cinderella, only to learn who she is in the company of her 7 jaunty woodland friends. With catchy personalities and comically expressive modeled clay faces, these CGI gnomes bring the movie to life, whether it's the whimsically pedantic Doc, voiced by Jeremy Swift, the philosophical grumpy Martin Kleba, or the incongruously youthful mute and big-eared dopey Andrew Barth Feldman, who suggests Tom Holland starring in a biopic of Mad Magazine's Alfred E. Newman. There's also a handful of new songs by Pasek and Paul that, from the witty Princess Problems to the generically enraptured Waiting on a Wish, hover somewhere between fine and forgettable. Gadot's evil queen doesn't just oppress Snow White. She's a fascist who brings a chill to the land, plundering its riches and trashing the humanity of the people. Does that make her the film's conscious metaphor for our current regime? You could say that we've seen other fairy tale rulers a lot like this one. Yet movies connect in mysterious ways. Who would have thought that a Disney live-action remake could seem this pointedly political? In the end, the most resonant romantic feeling Snow White leaves you with may be, someday my chintz authoritarian will come tumbling down. 88 years ago, Disney released Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, their first feature-length animated film, which not only completely changed the possibilities for the studio, but changed movie history by showing what animation could do. After years of honing their skills with shorts and silly symphonies, Disney defied all odds, and in doing so created a masterpiece that still feels magical all these years later. Yet even though Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is an undeniable classic, a triumph of cinema, and the template for so many other films that came after it, it's still not without its flaws. Disney was still clearly trying to figure out how to go from 10-minute shorts to a full 83-minute story, and it shows. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is essentially 10 minutes of plot and the beginning and end, with an hour of musical numbers about cleaning in between. Not to mention the fact that Snow White doesn't have much depth to her. Cinderella, released just 13 years later, knows how to make its title princess character feel like an actual person. And we know almost as little about the unnamed prince and queen. Snow White is a magnificent achievement, but it was also the result of animators trying to figure out how to utilize this new way of storytelling, and sometimes, in being the first to do it, falling short. Simply put, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs can be an important genre-defining masterpiece, and Rachel Zegler can be right about the film's flaws. Considering Disney's former interest in direct-to-video sequels, prequels, and their recent penchant for remaking their animated classics in live action, it's quite surprising that it's taken nearly a century for Disney to return to this world, but not for lack of trying. Snow White, helmed by 500 Days of Summer and The Amazing Spider-Man director Marc Webb, and written by Erin Cressida Wilson, Secretary Chloe, isn't attempting to improve Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but rather reimagines and tries to expand on those elements that were a bit thin when they were introduced back in 1937. As with almost all of Disney's live-action remakes, there's no way this retelling could overtake the original story as people's favorite, but Snow White does work as an intriguing expansion on this world and fits in as a nice companion to the beloved animated treasure. Most of what Disney's latest live-action remake expands upon involves Snow White, Zegler, and the kingdom in which she was born. Snow White was the only child of a king and queen who ruled over a kingdom with love, kindness, and compassion for each other. When the queen dies, the king remarries a woman with magical powers who becomes the new queen, Gadot. Yet, when the king departs and never returns, the new queen takes over the land, ruling with disdain for the people and hoarding the land's wealth while the kingdom itself struggles and starves. Many also think that Snow White has disappeared, but instead the queen treats her stepdaughter like a servant in her own castle. Every day the queen goes to her magic mirror and asks who the fairest one of all is. The mirror always states this person to be the queen, but after Snow White shows kindness to Jonathan Andrew Burnap, a local rebel and thief who sneaks into the castle, the mirror proclaims Snow White as the fairest one of all. The queen tasks her trusty huntsman, Ansu Kabia, with taking Snow White out into the woods, killing her and carving out her heart. But when the huntsman sees Snow White's kindness for himself, he tells her to run into the woods to safety. There, Snow White finds a magical forest, a group of 7 dwarfs, and a group trying to lead an uprising against the queen as she tries to help the kingdom become what it once was, long, long ago. For the most part, Snow White's attempt to make this story feel more complete works best when it does so on a larger scale. Getting into Snow White's backstory, her place within this kingdom, and her relationship with the evil queen are all smart choices that only make this fantasy more cohesive. This is no longer a story about a queen versus the fairest one of all. Now, it is a story about a dictatorial, wealthy, selfish leader who has to compete with empathy, kindness, and hope, and who could possibly relate to that. For all the controversy about how the film would handle the dwarfs, Wilson's development of these 7 men is a welcome change. As people who have lived together for the majority of their 274 years, the dwarfs have fun playing off their diametrically opposed attitudes. How does Grumpy live in a house with a guy named Happy anyways? While also playing up their major personality traits. In fact, one of the best developments in this remake comes in how the film handles Dopey, as well as Snow White's dynamic with him. Snow White and Dopey had some of the most iconic moments in the original film, and here, that's also true. Watching how this friendship blossoms is truly touching and makes you completely forget you're watching CGI dwarfs. Of course, not everything this film tries to update entirely works. The dwarfs now apparently have the power to sense gems in the mines with glowing hands, a choice that has absolutely no bearing on anything else in the film. On a similar note, Snow White does at times attempt to further explain or hit on various beats and imagery that don't really need expansion. We probably don't need an origin story for Snow White's name, or to be told that the kingdom was once ripe with juicy red apples, which Snow White and her mother would make into pies for the people. It doesn't hurt the story, but it does feel like unnecessary world building. The film's most confounding choice involves Jonathan's group of rebels, which were clearly supposed to be this film's updated take on the 7 dwarfs, before the CGI versions reminiscent of the original film were introduced. Snow White tries to let both of these groups work in this one story, but also tries not to pay too much attention to these rebels. We never spend enough time with them to truly care about who they are, and in shifting this film back into one with classic dwarfs, keeping this other bunch in the mix is more confusing than worthwhile. So much of why this live-action update works as well as it does is thanks to Zegler's performance. As a child, her father tells her to be fearless, fair, brave, and true, and we see this factor in every scene with Zegler's Snow White. She's optimistic, yet aware that change needs to be made for the good of the land. She's never trying to mimic the animated Snow White. Instead, Zegler tries to imbue her take with the same kind, spirit, and care for others that she saw her parents leading with. This is, without a doubt, one of the better performances from a live-action Disney princess so far, and Zegler beautifully captures this character's heart while still giving her more agency and depth than she had before. Unfortunately, Gadot's evil queen gets the short end of the stick in this version. Gadot is certainly giving it her all, but she doesn't have the sort of grandiose, imposing nature that makes the evil queen such a domineering villain. Also, Wilson's script doesn't really do her any favors, only slightly expanding on the few details we already knew about her. Yes, she's power-hungry, self-absorbed, and greedy, but now she sings. While Snow White knows exactly how to make its lead more interesting by diving deeper into who this character is, the evil queen doesn't receive an equally worthwhile extension, and it hurts the central dynamic of the film. As a musical, Snow White is a bit of a mixed bag. Naturally, the best songs here are updates of songs we already know, such as Hi-Ho, Whistle While You Work, and the Silly Song, often with additional lyrics that mostly work and don't take away from these beloved songs. It also shouldn't be a surprise that the best new songs here by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul of La La Land and The Greatest Showman fame do center around Zegler's Snow White. Here, she gets a much stronger I Want song with Waiting on a Wish, which makes for a solid introduction to this character. A Hand Meets a Hand, featuring Zegler and Burnap, is also quite good, while their other duo, Princess Problems, has a bit too much theater kid energy and winks too much at the audience for it to be entirely effective. Again, the weakest song here is the new song added for Gadot's evil queen, All Is Fair, which almost feels like an attempt to make her a more playful villain than she really is. Also, compared to Zegler's vocal skills, Gadot can't help but come up short. In updating this story, Webb finds a nice balance between the fantastical and the truth of this situation. Yes, we still have cute animals traipsing around Snow White, but in a post-enchanted world, they can't really be helping with the dishes and the cleaning. Webb still makes this Snow White feel like a fairy tale, and all the horrors and beauty that includes. Snow White, running into the magical forest, has all the haunting imagery that we'd expect, while the Princess Meets Her Prince Charming story has a little bit more meat on its bones. But Webb also ensures that we understand the stakes of what this kingdom is going through, never shying away from the darker aspects of that idea, while managing to be both grounded and magical. For the most part, Wilson's screenplay succeeds at figuring out what this version of Snow White needs 88 years later. The added depth is handled extremely well and in clever ways, finding new angles to explore with these characters and this world. At times, the story can feel a bit stitched together, especially when dealing with both the CGI dwarfs and the new dwarfs, but these moments of awkwardness and shaggy storytelling are few and far between. Considering the pressure this movie has going against it in remaking one of Disney's first true masterpieces and their first ever animated feature, it's surprising how well Snow White pulls off this update. It's not nearly perfect, and it can get sloppy at times in trying to bring this story up to date, but its earnestness and heart mostly make up for these flaws. Snow White deserved an update of sorts, and this is an admirable new take that certainly is one of the better live-action remakes from Disney. It might not be the fairest Snow White of all, but it's an admirable effort nonetheless. Snow White's hand falling with the poisoned apple toppling along with her dote said about her role that playing the evil queen was very different than what she had done before. She's used to playing the other end of where the heart should be, but she found it very delightful to get under her skin. The title logo was also revealed on October 27, 2023. Disney released the official first image of the film with Zegler as Snow White, as well as bashful Doc, Dopey, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, and Sneezy Zegler, confirmed that there is a lot of CGI which made her feel nervous. Footage of Gadot as the evil queen was shown at the 2024 CineCon. Disney presented new footage and a behind-the-scenes look during the 2024 Cine Europe. The 2024 D23 Expo presented a sneak preview with a clip of the musical number Whistle While You Work along with the first trailer. The trailer for Snow White was released on YouTube in August 2024 and became the most disliked film trailers on the platform, garnering an estimated nearly 1 million dislikes and over 82,000 likes within 3 weeks, according to available data from browser extensions that display an approximation of YouTube dislikes. The first full trailer debuted at D23 Brazil in November 2024 and was attached to select theatrical screenings of Universal Pictures as Wicked before eventually being released onto YouTube on December 3, 2024. Stuart Heritage of The Guardian criticized the visual effects for the animals and dwarves. She said, "The dwarves look like someone has snuck into Disneyland, grabbed the statues from Snow White's enchanted wish and wrapped them in human flesh as a serial killer would with a gift for their mother, and like someone has shaved the Sonic the Hedgehog from that first Sonic the Hedgehog trailer that everyone hated." Polygon's Petrana Rajelovic wrote, "The new Snow White looks like it's putting in more of a plot, likely one where our plucky heroine will stand up to her despotic tyrant of a stepmother in a YA dystopian plotline out of 2014. Maybe it'll work story-wise, visually, though everything seems like it's working on the same budget as ABC Family's Once Upon a Time." An international trailer featuring Snow White's origins was released on December 19, 2024. A featurette showing a behind-the-scenes look and how it would honor the legacy of the 1937 film was released on February 20th, 2025. That the press tour began in Tokyo on March 5th, 2025, with Zegler joining her Japanese dub counterpart Sakura Kiru to perform Waiting on a Wish live for the first time. That on March 10th, 2025, the date tickets for the film went on sale. Disney released new posters, a TV spot, and a film clip. Zegler later appeared on the March 17th, 2025 episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live to give the first live television performance of Waiting on a Wish. At least $70 million was spent on marketing, which combined with the main production budget gave Disney a total investment of $350 million for the film release during the 2022 D23 Expo presentation. It was announced that Snow White would be released in 2024 on September 15, 2022. The film was announced to have a release date of March 22, 2024. However, in October 2023, it was delayed a year to March 21, 2025, with the 2023 SAG-FT strike cited as the rationale for the delay. The theatrical release included engagements in IMAX, Dolby Cinema 4DX, ScreenX, and D-Box. The European premiere took place on March 12, 2025, at Spain's Alcazar of Segovia, which inspired the castle in the original film to give the film a more elaborate showing. At a fairy tale venued at a Hollywood premiere without regular red carpet press took place at the El Capitan Theater on March 15, 2025, due to the controversy surrounding Zegler and Gadot's political views. In Gadot's honor, the film's first premiere in Israel took place on March 19, 2025, at the Planet Cinema in Rishlaugen, with prominent figures from Israel attending. The film was re-released in 1,000 theaters in the United States on May 9, 2025, during the Mother's Day weekend, making $335,000. Snow White movie review. The defeating anti-buzz surrounding Disney's latest live-action remake of one of their animated properties, the 1937 title Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, is not only justified, it actually underestimated just how curlingly terrible the film would turn out to be, starring a searing Rachel Zegler in the title role and Gal Gadot. He's a cardboard cutout of the evil queen. This is a bamboo splinters under the fingernails viewing experience. It's not so much the clumsy attempts to diffuse the political insensitivity of the original cartoon that sinks the movie. The problems are more fundamental, starting with the fact that this is one of the ugliest things I have ever seen. It has the look of an AI-created migraine and is awash with sentiments. So sappy that you rather wish the huntsman would just get over his moral scruples and put us all out of our collective misery. A film made by people with cartoon dollar signs for eyes and not even the tiniest glimmer of art in their souls. Rachel Zegler's 2025 Disney remake becomes an instant hit on streaming after it faced box office disappointment after breaking out by starring as Maria in Steven Spielberg's critically acclaimed 2021 musical West Side Story. Zegler has starred in big budget productions such as The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and Shazam. Fury of Gods in 2024, she played Laura in the sci-fi flick Y2K and voiced the lead role in Netflix's Spellbound. Disney live-action remakes, on the other hand, have faced significant criticism regarding character development and stories from the Mulan remake that divided audiences and critics to the backlash against The Little Mermaid's casting. The studio's plan to revive classic animated films has not gone smoothly and faced a rough patch recently, up until the 2025 Lilo and Stitch, which has exceeded expectations at the box office and gained generally positive reviews. The Snow White live-action remake arguably marked a new low for Disney, starring Zegler as the titular princess, Gal Gadot as the evil queen, and Andrew Burnap as the new male lead. Jonathan. The film attracted controversy even before its theatrical release and was hit by negative reviews from critics against a production and marketing budget of around $400 million. The movie has only earned $25 million worldwide despite struggling at the box office. Snow White has become the #1 movie on Disney Plus after arriving on the Lilo and Stitch in the second spot, and the 2025 MCU movie Captain America Brave New World in the third spot. Time will tell how long it remains on top. While critics had mixed feelings about Disney's Snow White remake, it has received some praise from the audience, currently sitting at a 71% audience approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Many have highlighted the memorable songs and the movie's spirit, which lasts well after watching. With the movie arriving on Disney Plus, which gives its subscribers the convenience to watch it at home, those who may have skipped it in theaters might be more willing to check out the high-profile Disney remake. Let's face facts. The original animated version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a game changer for movies. That style and incredible use of animation redefined cinema. It is one of the best animated movies of all time and still has the power to thrill audiences even today. Over the past few years, Disney has remade some of its classic animated movies to various forms of success. Now it's the turn of Snow White to get the treatment. Rachel Zegler plays the ultimate Disney princess, with Gal Gadot playing the evil queen. The question is, can the film drag the story into the 21st century while keeping the charm, grace, and love of the original version, or should it have taken its own bite of the poisoned apple and not awoken to hit cinemas? Some spoilers ahead. I'm sad to report that the film, although containing some semblance to what we know and love, isn't one of the better remakes. At no time did the film thrill me or hit the enjoyment buttons. Fully updating it for the modern age is one thing, destroying almost everything that we hold dear about the property is something else. Whether it be changing the lyrics to certain classic tunes, changing character traits that should never have been changed at all, to extracting all the joy and soul from the property in certain places. Much has been made regarding the casting and the comments made by actress Rachel Zegler. And Gal Gadot's Israeli heritage, this has certainly had an effect on the buildup of the film. Some of it justified, however. It isn't the casting that's the problem. It's the fault of the script and the desire to make the film woke from the start to the very end. This isn't what we're expecting or desiring. Instead, we're given something that won't be loved or remembered fondly in the future. This is despite a winning appearance from Gal Gadot as the Wicked Queen, one that is surprisingly shorter than we would be expecting. Rachel Zegler is fairly good as the title character viewed it down by a screenplay that sees her the climax look like she wants vengeance. The look on her face is one of anger and arrogance, traits that the character of the changes to the story. Great Prince Charming doesn't exist here. Instead, he is a new character, Jonathan, played by Andrew Burnap, instead of being a prince. Monarchy, Rachel Zegler gets her wish, as the song Someday My Prince Will Come is omitted from the film soundtrack. The classic hi-ho song remains, but with altered lyrics that drag the film into the 21st century. The mine scene now resembles a cross between Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit. It looks good but doesn't fit, taking us out of the charm. The film should have the classic scene of the Queen's transformation before her demise is gone. Instead, it is replaced by completely changed. Fans of the original version, expecting the charming happy ending, won't get it. There is the happy ending, of course. That much isn't up for debate, but it is not as satisfying as we would have expected. However, the transformation of the Queen into the old hag, complete with a poisoned apple, although different, is actually a good change. This is one scene in sequence that does have chills running down our spines. Both Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot nail this brilliantly, although why Snow White takes a bite is different. There has been much controversy over how the Zeven dwarfs have been portrayed. To a certain extent, they are justified. The CGI that recreates this lovable characters takes us out of the film to an extent. We do enjoy seeing them appear in the film. How could we not? But in one of the worst changes, Dopey is depicted as not wanting to speak, to be too scared to say anything. Is portrayed almost like a little boy who is scared of his own shadow, and then the unspeakable change happens. She speaks. Dopey, so lovable in the animated film and charming with his silence throughout, suddenly begins talking to many. This may come as a welcome change to me. It is a huge mistake, one the film suffers from. Let's get this out of the way. Now, when she was announced as being Snow White, Rachel Zegler was attacked, and accusations of colorblind casting were leveled at her, and the film is strongly rejected. Those ridiculous comments then, and I strongly reject them now, to Minnie the actress, shouldn't have been cast in the film, and that was before the comments that led to more eye towards her. While I think she is good rather than great in the role, she makes it her role. In my initial reaction comments, I said she was a poor Snow White. For that, I apologize to the actress. After thinking about the film and her performance, I admit I was wrong. She plays the role as best she can. It is the script that lets her down, trying to drag the character into a new age while also trying to keep the original version. It doesn't work and comes across as confusing. I can understand the direction they wanted the character to go down, but I'm sorry, making her a strong, independent woman may work in other movies, but not in a Disney film about a princess. Gal Gadot chills us as the evil Queen, despite being in the film less than we thought. She gives a tremendously evil performance from her first introduction to her final scenes. The actress nails the role to perfection. She also gets her own song and dance sequence, which takes us by surprise. The transformation sequence into the old hag is mostly done in silhouette, but when she appears in her disguise, she scares us. Her scenes with Snow White show up. Character dripping with hatred and loathing. It is a wonderful performance from Gal Gadot, directed by Marc Webb and written by Erin Cressida Wilson. The film is enjoyable in parts. Webb directs the film well, getting some great performances from his cast, staging the musical sequences colorfully and making the film look great. Many of the special effects hit the mark. Sadly, many don't either. The dwarfs are the main problem with the effects. Also, after Wicked, the film feels like something we have seen before, as well as something we haven't seen before. It is a paradox at times. The films are different while also feeling like they are joined together. It is a confusing aspect at times that has us starting to feel we are watching a different movie than we thought we would see, one that has been done before. The screenplay, while trying to tell us the tale with a modern twist, will shock some of the audience. Anyone expecting to see a live-action remake of the animated version won't recognize some of what they will see. As I've said before, updating the property is one thing, changing it to what we get in the film is something else, maybe. That's there is none. I've got problems with the film. Perhaps I expected the film to be the lovable tale. I've adored since a young age. Maybe it's the shock of seeing the property change so much that some of it is unidentifiable to many of my fellow critics adored the film, and that's great. I'm just sad I don't share their affection for this film, the film. Although a disappointment form, you will find legions of fans worldwide. They will read my comments and completely disagree with method is the nature of the beast. If we'll love the same things, the world would be a pretty boring place. I may be making it sound as if the film is bad. Believe me, it's not. It will appeal to families and may become one of their favorite movies. It will certainly appeal to younger viewers who will be amazed by the CGI creatures that appear. One of them, the young deer, reminded me so much of Bambi. Wouldn't be shocked to learn Disney is making a live-action remake of that film. The special effects are there to make it believable, but its one thought alone will show that my mind was yearning for something that would resonate with me. Musical numbers, magical animals, and some great performances. Can't hide the fact that this isn't the film we expected to see. Don't get me wrong, the messages and morals shine through from the start, but they feel like an afterthought after everything the film contains. My fellow reviewer, Darcy completely adored the film, calling it one of her favorite remakes off the mall. While I'm pleased she has a different opinion to me, I can't agree with her. Maybe it's because I've loved the original version. Ever since I first saw Whitty was 3, it could be being too harsh, but I left the screening feeling deflated and empty for all the fun it should have had. While the film certainly doesn't deserve or need to take a beat from a poisoned apple, it doesn't have me wanting to whistle while I work, and that's the biggest letdown of them all. Other information about this film: I've done this song and dance before. It could be lazy and simply refer you to my review of Disney's 2023 live-action update of their 1989 animated classic. The Little Mermaid in live writing an entirely new piece on the studio's remake of their original princess picture Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, as they share a lot of the same issues, ranging from high-def visual effects to misguided reimaginings off their protagonist's motivations and desires. But Snow White contains some uniquely hellish layers that make the film, while not particularly worth watching, at least worth discussing. Really, it's impossible to overstate the importance of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, not only to the history of the Walt Disney Studios, but of film history at large. The 1937 film, inspired by the 1812 Brothers Grimm fairy tale, was the first feature-length animated movie released in the United States. Many of Disney and the film's technical achievements have since been reassessed and reattributed to international filmmakers who pioneered them first, like German silhouette animator Lotte Reneger. But I digress. Director Marc Webb and screenwriter Erin Cressida. Wilson's update expands on the simple but effective original, in which Snow White, a princess who dreams that a prince will someday arrive to whisk her away from living under the thumb of her cruel stepmother, the evil queen who tries to rid herself of the one obstacle to her owning the title of the fairest one of all. Snow White opens with a prologue that establishes her upbringing, born during a heavy snowstorm, thus granting her her name. Her parents, the king and queen, taught their kindness and the importance of passing it on to others. But after the queen fell ill and died, the king fell under the spell of a gorgeous, mysterious woman, Gadot, who he married before embarking on a military campaign across the country, never to be seen again. As the years pass, the evil queen oppresses the kingdom with high taxes and unnecessary military conscriptions, obsessed only with ensuring that the magic mirror will never reveal to her that Snow White is fairer than she. While Snow White, Rachel Zegler, Amelia Fosher, play share as a child, remains strapped behind the castle walls, working as a scullery maid, dreaming of the day that she can break free and help her people. Like many of Disney's live-action remakes of their animated classics, Snow White awkwardly wavers between retaining the greatest hits of the original while shaking up tropes that can now be viewed as dated or anti-feminist. If I can say one thing in favor of this new Snow White, it's that it doesn't create a lot of unnecessarily convoluted plot points in working overtime to ensure that it doesn't appear like the princess is chasing after the prince, nor does it lose sight of its heroine's core values, the way that The Little Mermaid did, where Ariel is buoyed first and foremost by her curiosity about the human world, not her desire for a man. Snow White is propelled by acts of kindness. This is evident in the manner in which she confronts the huntsman sent by the evil queen to kill her sincere curiosity and concern, as opposed to fear her treatment. of the 7 dwarves she befriends after she flees into the forest, exhibiting empathy toward Dopey when witnessing how he is teased by the others, while being undeterred by someone like Grumpy, who initially rebukes her graciousness, and in how scores of adorable animals naturally flock to her rather than mangling that key trait. This new Snow White enhances it by making the story less contained, blowing it up to encompass her empathy for her suffering. Subjects which in turn spurs her to fight back against the evil queen's tyranny like High Bailey before her Zegler's performance goes a long way toward, if not completely compensating for at least partially obscuring some of the film's shortcomings, while highlighting her character strengths. No, White's personality is a bit austere than is traditional, but her expressions are open and bright. Her wide eyes able to convey optimism or sympathy or sadness a drop of a hat, her voice cheerful and clear. It's about a opposite of Gadot's performance as 1. Can get hers with her horrendously auto-tuned singing voice utterly lacks conviction, all sly smiles and one-note line readings that neither illustrate her villain nor serve as camp. Still, it remains odd that Disney on the whole appears hell-bent on publicly distancing themselves from the pillars that the studio was built upon, while continuing to profit off of them behind the scenes. This have it both ways. NES manifests itself across all the industries the company has its fingers in. Perhaps the most potent example regards the studio's 1946 live-action and animated feature film hybrid Song of the South, whose racist slant has led to the studio never officially releasing it on home video, while Disney theme parks up until the last few years merchandised the movie's critter characters and centered them in one of the park's most popular attractions, Splash Mountain. While ignoring the story's thornier aspects, as the prince frequently criticized over the years for presumably being her sole character trait, Snow White doesn't entirely issue romance Prince Charming, is replaced with the leader of a well-intentioned band of rebels named Jonathan Andrew Burnap, struggling to conjure significant leading man charisma, who pushes Snow White to take action herself while their relationship evolves. From reluctant cooperation to love and respect with more nuance than the all-consuming love at first sight from the original tale, but it often feels like it's trying too hard to push a female empowerment narrative that lacks the substantial thoughtfulness or political fire to back it up. Now, White eliminates a couple of the animated movie's most iconic songs that run against this messaging, namely, I'm Wishing and Someday My Prince Will Come. The latter's instrumentals only are used as a musical motif, replacing them with forgettably poppy new tunes by Benji. Peckin' Justin Paul's No. White's originally Want song, I'm Wishing, is now waiting on a wishin' which, rather than the passive wishing for the one I love to find me actively, perswondering will she rise, or her head will she lead, or just beled far more egregious is a later dude between Jonathan and Snow White, titled in what surely must be an intentionally meta-move princess problems in this song. Jonathan accuses Snow White of ignorance born of her privileged position even in the context of the film. These lyrics don't quite jive even Jonathan on his initial meaty, and with Snow White on the castle grounds when she catches him stealing food to bring back to the poor rough to see that she is neither ignorant of what is happening around her nor privileged, but like The Little Mermaid and Aladdin and many of the live-action Disney remakes before this, they convey a fundamental misunderstanding of these women. And the fact that they have always been empowered, they are loving and kind. That and will Disney, while in the middle of dismantling the core principles of some of its most popular and enduring content, continue to profit off tie-in merchandise ranging from dolls to popcorn buckets to costumes targeted at princess fans young and old, absolutely, while spending so much time reworking these so-called princess problems. Snow White offensively renders its dwarf characters as CGI abominations intended to look like real-life iterations of their animated counterparts, effectively creating entities more frightening than any of the creatures in the Scarywoods, while swerving away from what would actually be a modern update worth having casting real dwarf actors top play these roles. The backlit set shazy visuals and cartoonish, non-human characters place Snow White in a perpetual uncanny valley where everything is not quite grounded enough to feel real, nor quite fanciful enough to exist as fantasy. The production and costume design is just as confused with nounifying aesthetic. This take on Snow White's famous blue and yellow dresses, both fresh and classic, But everything else it's giving Ren Ferret's homages to the original film are clumsy. When the dwarves sing Hi How Heil traveling through the mine where they work, the scene plays more. A sauna advertisement for the Mine Train roller coaster at Walt Disney World with a budget of over $240 million. Snow White is one of the most expensive movies ever made, but it has nothing to show for it. 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was groundbreaking. 2025 Snow White may be worse than bad. It's bland and confused about what it wants to be. It coasts on the notion that audiences' existing feelings for these characters and stories will be enough to compensate for the fact that there's next to nothing to grab onto here. This won't be the last time this discussion is had. The trailer for Disney's upcoming live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch played before. Snow White Beauty's the first time I felt the weariness and frustration with one of these projects. Just look at the poor box office returns, and the numerous off-screen controversies extends of are beyond myself one of the most frustrating things about Disney's Snow White. 2025 was the number of comments I saw that criticized the movie that never actually discussed the movie itself. The statements were more about what Rachel Zegler said about the original animated movie, Gal Gadot's nationality/political affiliation, or the movie's extensive reshoots. So tough that some of that discourse a little. Here's an actual review of the actual movie. Marc. Webb's carved up Snow White as a bit of a mess thanks to the forced fan service, but the movie's strength can be found in its original ideas. Also, the movie's soundtrack is one of Disney's best in the last decade. The movie is a frustrating watch primarily because the filmmakers show us time and again that they can make good choices, yet those decisions are undone with a series of poor ones, possibly due to studio interference. For example, the CGI woodland creature, Esu, that you'll want to hug and squeeze them into itty-bitty pieces like Tiny Toons Elmira, whereas the dwarves look like hideous, lifelike gnomes. What is it about dwarves and mines that attract bad CGI? You'd think Disney would have learned from Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, Snow. White sets such a high bar with its opening musical number that the rest of the movie struggles to live up to it. It's a great example of how this movie was trying to be something other than a retelling of the original story. The set pieces, scope and scale are grand. Snow White's, well, in particular, looks so enchanting thanks to the floral and flora, but even after the flowers wither, the visuals still look great. So it's odd when the enchanted forest looks so plain, or even when the sets look overly barren, such as when Snow White Zegler helps Jonathan Andrew Burnap escape. It's a massive courtyard with a handful of medieval torches. The inclusion of the dark forest is a fantastic visual. However, narratively, the sinister forest's existence is never mentioned. Nor does Snow White receive a word of warning that anything dangerous exists beyond the kingdom's borders. The movie often sinks beneath the weight of its might. Fan service. There is no better example than the dwarves' introduction. The iconic song Hee Ho amounts to nothing other than to remind you this is a remake of a Disney property. If you thought that maybe the dwarves would assist in bringing down the evil Queen Gadot, you'd be wrong. Similarly, Jonathan's band of rebels do nothing to further the story. The troop consists of 7 individuals, none of which look or act like the notable dwarves. None of them have speaking roles except for Quig, George. Appleby, while we don't know what was left on the cutting room floor, the movie seems to have 2 sets of dwarves and no idea of what to do with. Either it's also distracting to have an actual little person, Appleby, standing next to the computer-generated dwarves. The inclusion of How and Whistle while you work eat up space, leaving little room for original ideas, such as whether Snow White's father is still alive, a compelling story idea that is relegated to a line of dialogue. Event the romance between Snow White and Jonathan is cut down by oddly placed sequences that will make you forget that there's a budding relationship. The song Princess Problems is cute, but would have made a lot more sense if it happened before Snow White stood up to the Queen. Zegler does a good job embodying the Disney princess, but it's her singing voice that brings songs such as Waiting on a Wish and A Hand Meets a Hand to life. These numbers are some of the highest this movie has to offer. Burnap has the charisma of a Disney prince, but his singing voice is on the weaker end of the spectrum, so I guess he is perfectly cast. Gadot surprisingly holds her own with her musical number. All is fair. However, it's her transformation into the old, that's incredible. The benchmark of Snow White are the original songs. Good Things Grow captures that classic Disney musical magic, but it's the rousing Snow White Returns that is 1 minute and 26 seconds of utter perfection. It's the perfect example of how this movie cuts its magical moments criminally short. More detail, Disney's Snow White is a remake of the classic 1937 animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The film is directed by Marc Webb, who is most known for his work on 500 Days of Summer and the Amazing Spider-Man films Snow. White stars Rachel Zegler as the titular character and Gal Gadot as the evil queen, with the endless controversies surrounding the film, bad reviews and reactions from audiences. I went into this movie with very low expectations. I myself am a massive Disney fan and have gone to see every Disney live-action remake released in theaters. Having now seen the movie, though, I can tell you the movie is not as bad as people have made it out to be, having said that it is a loud cry from being worth paying to watch in the theaters. With Rachel Zegler's criticisms regarding the original movie's classic songs and True Love's Kiss storyline, I feared there was little of the original movie that was going to be brought to life in this live-action remake. While that is partly true, when Snow White has scenes that are from the iconic original movie, it's at its strongest. Having said that, that's just the problem. The movie feels more like a mashup of other Disney movies than it does a Snow White remake. The whole appeal of these live-action remakes is for audiences to get to relive the nostalgia they had watching the original movie without also getting to see new scenes and elements that expand on the original movie. Snow White does have lots of new elements added to it. The problem is they're taken entirely from other Disney movies, such as 2023's Wish and 2010's Tangled. Due to that, the film juggles multiple storylines at once. It doesn't feel like a cohesive movie at all. It feels like a film that's trying to be a Snow White remake, while trying to also be a remake of Wish and Tangled. Rachel Zegler is fine as Snow White, though not great considering all the controversies regarding her PR training. Fine, unfortunately, isn't good enough to justify or distract from her many PR missteps. Gal Gadot is hit and miss as well. Some of her scenes are fine, while others are absolutely awful. The movie's new songs also fall into a similar trap, where some are good and others are excruciating to listen to. Overall, when Snow White actually feels like a Snow White remake, there is enjoyment to be had. Having said that, the film is far more about political uprising and less about the classic story of the Princess and the Seven Dwarfs. In the end, it feels. The title Snow Wish would have suited the movie much more of our make of 2023's Wish than the classic animated movie all week. My daughter has been singing Waiting on a Wish, which was written by Benj Pack and Justin Paul and sung by Rachel Zegler, the star of Disney's new live-action Snow White. She first heard the song when we watched a behind-the-scenes clip of Zegler explaining its importance as an I Want song. You know, it's the song a Disney princess sings at the beginning of the movie to explain what she desires. For her life, my personal favorite is Belle's in Beauty and the Beast this week. My daughter's favorite has been Snow White's, even though she hasn't seen the movie yet. We're going after school today. I'm fairly certain that she's going to love it more than any of the other live-action remakes that have been made in the last decade. This one feels particularly designed for a young audience. This is what makes it so hard to judge, because as a parent, I am part of the inevitable audience, but not the intended one. So, does it really matter if the film is perhaps the strangest, hottest mess out of all the modern remakes by modern Disney? I don't mean woke, even though the movie's updates are, of course, being politicized that way. Instead, I'm referring to the practical updating that Disney makes in this version of Snow White, in an attempt to honor the fairy tale's legacy as its first animated feature-length film. The film also gives the princess an identity that is separate from her desire to marry a prince. If you were asked to tell someone the story of Snow White, you would probably hit those plot points that have been embedded into our collective cultural memory since 1937. An envious stepmother wants to kill her. Stepdaughter for being the most beautiful in the land. The stepdaughter escapes into the forest and moves in Seven Dwarfs. The stepmother finds her and tricks her into eating a poisoned apple that puts her to sleep, and Snow White awakens after a kiss from her true love, a prince from another kingdom. In the live action remake, this storyline is complicated. Snow White's benevolent father has disappeared, and her stepmother Gadot has become an evil queen who refuses to help the villagers who don't have enough to eat and for whom life is purely about subsistence. When Snow White makes a wish at the castle, well, she isn't hoping for a prince. There isn't even a prince in the movie. Instead, she is wishing to become the fearless, brave, fair, and true leader that her parents raised her to be. She wants to end her stepmother's fascist rule and make the world more fair and more equal for the villagers. She just doesn't feel like she's in a position to help. This changes when Snow White is being forced to wash floors and do laundry. She meets her non-prince, Jonathan Andrew Burnap, who is stealing potatoes from the castle stores. He is the leader of the Merry Minsk band of bandits who live in the woods and steal to give to those in need. He inspires her to speak up for those who can't. That means that in this retelling, Snow White is given a true character arc that centers on her wanting to make the world more equitable. She is not the fairest in the land because of her beauty, although she is also beautiful, but because she is kind. The point is not that Jonathan's kiss awakens Snow White from her sleep so they can live happily ever after. There isn't even a wedding at the end. It's that she awakens so she can regain control of her kingdom from an evil wish to help the villagers, just like her parents did for some. These obvious changes to the plot will be seen as too woke. However, despite the adapted storyline's poor execution, the plot itself actually works well. It's a natural progression that is bound to happen to a story that has been retold and evolved over hundreds of years. Even the Grimm brothers themselves published multiple versions of Snow White in the early 1800s, which was just one of the many tales they collected from the storytellers around them. When Disney first adapted Snow White 88 years ago, it made significant changes, removing many of the dark details in the Grimm version to make the story more palatable. In their sanitized version, the prince is not a glorified necrophiliac who makes a deal with the dwarfs to own Snow White's dead asleep body. Instead, he fell in love at first sight with her when she is singing at the beginning of the movie, which is why he kisses her at the end to wake her up. There is no kiss in the Grimm version. Instead, the servants carrying hair accidentally drop her glass coffin and dislodge the poison apple from her throat. When she wakens, the prince informs her that he owns her. Disney turned what was a glorified example of pure coverture into a happy marriage plot. Now, once again, Disney is changing what happily ever after means. Snow White becomes who she was meant to be, not a wife, but a queen returning to the castle, using her words instead of violence to change the hearts and minds of her people. The plot is not a hot mess because of this update. The film's not even a hot mess because of controversies surrounding the movie. Instead, it's the way the plot is executed, the way the creative pieces are combined to make something that just feels off. Or as my friend who saw the film with me politely declared during the credits, it flat by ambitious choices. She's referring to the use of CGI for the dwarfs and animals, inconsistent costumes and sets, and the oddity of the new original songs like All Is Fair and princess problems going into the movie. I was nervous about the use of CGI for the dwarfs, and it just feels weird. Do I think this newest generation of kids who have grown up with Cocomelon will care? But I found the juxtaposition between Zegler's emotive Snow White and the dwarf's humanless eyes and unnatural movements to be unsettling. However, those who are looking for homages to the 1930s classic may appreciate that the CGI dwarfs look like their animated counterparts by far, the strangest. Contrast in the movie is the costume and set design. Zegler's first costume is a red and blue gown that looks like the type of costume one would order their child for. A princess gown, but looks like a knockoff of itself. But once Zegler is attired in the traditional yellow, blue, and red dress, she looks like a real princess overall. Despite her uneven musical performance, is the most impeccably styled and looks uncannily like her animated counterpart, even though her villain song All Is Fair is stilted and awkwardly choreographed. Her scaled gown, translucent crown, and jewel-toned cape are mesmerizing. The real costume-uming issue lies in the outfit of Jonathan, the antithetical male lead. Everything he wears is a version of a hooded shirt that is in the style of a button-down that one would wear in the new Outsiders musical. The only thing that changes is the color palette. The rest of the bandits are similarly dressed, and the result is that whenever Snow White is in a scene new at the Met, feels like she has time-raveled into a grungier location in a more modern Eredel, so turns the characters into one-dimensional plot pieces that are primarily there to act as living, proving that Jonathan is not a prince. This distraction is even worse during scenes with Snow White, the bandits, and the dwarfs, because the inconsistencies among the costume-umming mix of CGI and live actors make it feel like you're watching 3 different movies at the same time. The set doesn't help these issues. It's hard to put your finger on exactly what's wrong with the village, castle, or woods. But while the vegetation is lush and exactly what you'd expect to see in a fairy tale, the rest of the world feels too fake. Everything looks like the gimmicky stage you'd see in an overacted show at a Disney park. This film, directed by Marc, screenplay by Erin Cressida Wilson, produced by Jared LeBoff, starring Rachel Zegler, Andrew Burnap, Gadot, cinematography Mandy Walker, edited by Mark Sanger, Sarah Brasher, music by Jafar Larry Morey and Frank Churchill, Peck and Paul Production Company's Walt Disney Pictures, Mark Platt Productions, distributed by Walt Disney Studios. Motion Pictures release dates: March 12, 2025 in Alcazar of Segovia, March 21, 2025 in United States, running time 109 minutes, United States language. English budget $1 million. So guys, this is the review of Snow White movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.